So let's get into this and start our unboxing of our 13-inch 2020 MacBook Pro. So the most recent Mac release in terms of their laptop lineup, the 13-inch, bringing over the keyboard and some of the speakers from the 16-inch that was released earlier this year. But here we have the 13-inch MacBook Pro. Going through the quick specs, you get the 2560 by 1600 display, typical for these MacBook Pros. We went with the Core i5, 2 GHz base, 3.8 GHz boost. Plenty of performance, way more performance than some previous models that came with like a dual core 4-thread CPU. So this is much improved in that perspective. We get 16 gigs of 3700 megahertz RAM. So that is perfect. That'll definitely speed up our computer quite a bit. And then we go with a 512 gigabyte PCIe SSD. So an NVMe SSD, plenty of speeds from that perspective. And then we get our 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports. So of course, being that this is a Mac and not a Windows PC, you're really getting all of your I/O through your Thunderbolt ports. You're gonna have to carry around dongles and things like that, but pretty much as much I/O and as much throughput as you need from the MacBook Pro, it can deliver as long as you have the correct dongles for that. Get our headphone jack, everything else typical for the MacBook Pro, and of course the Touch Bar and Touch ID. So let's get this thing unboxed. Typical Mac unboxing experience. Just gotta go ahead and do the quick peel. Very nice. Typical Mac, nice tight fit of the box. Just let it slide out. There we go. So we'll pull out our Mac and we'll see what we get inside of the case. So of course we get our USB-C charger, our little pamphlet, and then we get our charging brick. Let's see what the wattage is on this guy. So we're looking at a 61 watt charger, so that should be plenty for this MacBook Pro. Not really requiring that much power, so that should get us charged up pretty quick. So now just to do the final little unwrapping of our Mac Pro. And there we go. So very, very nice. Nice and thin, nice and light. Comparing this to like my 2015 MacBook Pro, definitely slimmed down quite a bit. Even just the overall dimensions of it have slimmed down quite a bit as well. But overall, very, very nice. Yeah, let's open this guy up. Of course, the nice screen protector, but we get the Touch Bar and it turns on automatically like all Macs do nowadays. But we do get a very nice keyboard upgrade, going away from the butterfly and switching back to those scissor switches that really gave Apple some issues with the butterfly keyboard. But we get our Touch ID sensor, our Touch Bar, very, very nice, and a giant trackpad. So this trackpad is huge, and I do love that from that perspective. The speaker layout on this guy, upward firing, so you're gonna get some really, really nice sound, and plenty of reviewers have already done an in-depth review of the MacBook Pro, the 13-inch, in terms of sound quality, overall speed, power efficiency, things like that. So I'm not gonna do that in this video. Just wanted to do a quick point of view unboxing just to give you guys an overview of what you're gonna get out of the box. And the real point of this video is to get into the discussion of buy a MacBook Pro now or wait for Apple Silicon in the next couple years, most likely at the end of this year for the MacBook lineup. Whether it's a MacBook Pro or just a MacBook or a MacBook Air, who really knows at this point. But do you wait for Apple Silicon or do you go with Intel x86? So it's a tough time for Mac users right now that are trying to figure out if they want to upgrade an old laptop now to one of the Intel-based Macs, wait a couple months until that first Apple Silicon MacBook comes out, or maybe even wait a couple years until all the kinks are really worked out of that Apple Silicon transition, and you know you're getting a stable product, and you know you're getting stable software to go along with it. So let's go over the quick pluses and minuses of both sides of the argument, but starting with the Apple products we have right now. So of course the Intel-based MacBook Air and MacBook Pro. The 13-inch MacBook Pro or the MacBook Air is most likely going to be the first product we see transitioned over to Apple Silicon at the end of this year, and we might get an announcement on September 15th with Apple's keynote. That's definitely going to be hopefully the iPhone 12, next-gen Apple Watch, and possibly AirTags as well. But getting back to our MacBook, So you know what you're getting with this Intel-based product. You know you're getting 2 or 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, you know the screen, you know you're going to get these bezels, you're going to get the much better and much improved keyboard and speaker system of the MacBook Pro series. And you don't really know what you're going to see from the Apple Silicon-based laptop. You don't know what the screen's going to be. Hopefully it's a smaller, thinner package, being that you're not going to have to dissipate as much heat with the ARM-based chip. So we don't really know what we're going to get, whereas you know the design of the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro. It's been around for a few years now in the same, pretty much the same package, and it's a great package. It's thin, it's light, and it packs a great punch. The other thing that you know you're going to get with these Intel-based MacBook Pros and MacBook Air is that it's going to support all the software that's currently running on macOS. We know Apple's working with the likes of Adobe and Microsoft to sort of transition over those big developer applications like Microsoft Office, as well as Adobe Creative Cloud applications like Photoshop. But what about those smaller developer applications? We know Apple has come out with Rosetta 2 and Universal Binary 2, but how long does that transition take for some of those smaller developers? We don't really know that answer. So if you're going to switch over to an Apple Silicon MacBook as soon as it comes out, you don't really know that you're going to have support for all the applications you use on a daily basis, which is of course a reason to hold off and maybe go with an Intel-based laptop right now. If you need to upgrade right this second, maybe your computer broke or you're having another issue, then you're going to have to go with this anyways. But maybe in a couple months your computer breaks. Do you go with an Apple Silicon-based Mac or do you go with an Intel-based Mac? And I'd love to get your guys' opinion on that, so definitely leave that in the comments below. What would you choose in that moment, in that sort of weird situation, if anything were to happen? Do you go with Apple Silicon or do you go with Intel? And going over the other side to that coin, once Apple sort of completely transitions over all of their computers to Apple Silicon, then all of the new applications are going to be developed for that. Rosetta 2 and Universal Binary 2 don't work in reverse. They only really work when you're transferring x86 over to that ARM architecture. So when newer applications are developed by developers, are they still going to spend the time to develop an x86-based application as well as an ARM-based application, put just as much time into that x86 application? And Apple hasn't really given a definitive answer as to how long they're going to support Intel-based Macs. Is it going to be 3 years? Is it going to be 5? Is it going to be 10? We don't really know. So what happens when developers are only developing for ARM and then you don't have application support on your Intel PC? Maybe it's 2, 3, 4 years down the line. Is that something to think about right now? Or do you make that transition when the time comes? Or do you prepare now and you go with an Apple Silicon Mac as soon as it comes out? That's a really tough decision whether you make that early jump onto the Apple Silicon train or you hold off, you wait a little bit, you make sure everything gets ironed out. I'm hoping Apple already has everything ironed out when they release the product, but who really knows when it comes to your smaller developer applications and things such as that. So I'd love to hear your guys' feedback in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this whole Apple Silicon transition? What are you thinking when it comes to maybe your next purchase of a MacBook? What are you thinking for your next purchase of a MacBook? If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel.